Oh. What is this?
May I have your attention? We can do a sound check. Councilor
Argument number 12.
Earl's 11.
Shanton.
Vogel, 9, number 9.
Tata, 8.
Clerk number 6.
O'Brien, number 5. Zeed, number 4.
Jensen, number 3. Devlin, number 2.
Khan, number 1.
Before we begin tonight, I'd like to acknowledge with regrets the passing of Robin DeMera. For those of you who knew her, a wonderful individual, generous, kind, and civic-minded, having served both Anna Jake's Hospital, the Custom House, and the Crisis Center in various capacities through the years. And we'll miss her. A moment of silence, please. Thank you. I invite you to join in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilor Vogel. Councilor Z.
Here.
Councilor Devlin.
Here.
Councilor Earls. Councilor Agaman.
Here.
Councilor Junta.
Present.
Councilor Khan.
Present.
Councilor O'Brien.
Here.
Councilor Shan.
Present.
Councilor Tanta.
Here.
Council President.
Present.
All present.
Are they ready for our left?
There are two the councilors will see on their desk. The first is Communication 90, which is the Harborside Half Marathon. And we have order number 66, which is a non-exclusive use easement, also submitted.
Motion to waive the rules and accept the late file items.
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor of waiving rules to admit these items, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we'll take them up in the appropriate committee. Let's see, we have some public comment tonight. While the clerk's getting the list of people who signed up, I'd like to remind you that you have 2 minutes, okay, to speak. We have a busy agenda tonight. There are many people who are here for a number of different reasons. We want everyone to have an opportunity to speak without keeping us here to midnight. We've got too many other things. Our first name is Stephen Conley.
Good evening. I'm here tonight to just remind you, I left update information in regards to a letter that I sent all of you, and I also put an update of some more information in all your pigeonholes. And I want you to know that I met with the governor on the 28th at the State House, also spoke with Attorney General Healy, and also Secretary of Safety, Mr. Bennett. And they said to me that they would meet with me about the gag orders on the Massachusetts State Police and on the New Hampshire National Guard. And since then, I met with Senator Tarr and Representative Hill's office, and I understand they're going to send a letter to both the Attorney General and also the Governor and ask if they can be present when the Governor and Massachusetts Attorney General meets with us. And I would like very much for the councilors to think about writing a letter, pretty much like the New Hampshire Representative Peter Smith wrote, and it covers quite a few of the areas. The other thing I really encourage you to do is look at the video that we have produced. And what we did is we hired a licensed drone operator to put his plane up over the beaches in Hampton and also Salisbury, July 4th of last year. And we hired him again Labor Day of this year and also July 4th of this year. And I think you'll find it very compelling. And again, we're not asking for the shutdown of the plant. We're trying to find out if people are going to be evacuated timely and safely if there's an accident at the plant. And that's what we're asking for. And unfortunately, you know, we've got 7 towns in Massachusetts and also some towns in New Hampshire, and FEMA and the NRC stonewalling us. And so I think it's really up to ourselves to come up with our own destiny on this and prove that democracy still works in this country.
Thank you, Mr. Conley. Your time is up.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lucas Phipps.
Thank you, fellow city council. Thank you. Ooh, excuse me. Thank you, fellow city council. So, I sent an email asking over a week ago that Newburyport say yes to dignity, yes to humanity, and yes to community. I asked for all those around me. I asked that the city council support a resolution supporting a yes vote on question 3, to prevent a referendum that would seek to overturn current law that protects transgender and queer people from public discrimination in places such as school bathrooms and locker rooms, restaurants, and hotels. Citing public safety, the argument to appeal this protection has been built upon baseless fears. A study by the Williams Institute at UCLA School of Law found no link between trans-inclusive policies and bathroom safety. I asked the City Council to make this one thing clear, that transgender and queer friends, family, and neighbors belong in Newburyport and belong in Massachusetts. When members of our community, especially those of younger generations, hear that their very human rights are threatened, it is the job of the people elected by the people to let them know that they matter. Basic dignity will stand, discrimination will not. I'd like to thank Councillor Tantar for introducing this resolution and Councillor Khan for co-sponsoring it. I'm now formally asking the City Council to support this resolution, urging a yes vote on question 3, November 6th. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucas. Well done. Amir Ibrahim, please.
Good evening, councilors. Amr Ibrahim, 85 Prospect Street. I'm actually going to be speaking in 2 parts today, wearing 2 different hats. So for my initial comments, I'll be speaking as a representative of the Newburyport Human Rights Commission. And as Mr. Phipps mentioned, that the protection of human rights actually, I believe, is not a political or partisan issue. On July 8th, 2016, the Massachusetts legislature and Governor Baker signed into law Massachusetts Bill 2407, extending protections to our citizens from discrimination due to gender identity with respect to any place of public accommodation. Now, recent research has shown that transgender people are frequently denied access, verbally harassed, or physically assaulted while trying to use public restrooms. And this is according to Jody L. Herman, a public policy scholar at the Williams Institute at UCLA, and she is also one of the authors of a recent study published regarding incidents before and after passage of transgender protections in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Unfortunately, Keep Massachusetts Safe has spearheaded an effort to repeal this legislation, citing it creates a safety and privacy issue for women in these public areas. The recent UCLA study I mentioned above studied rates of assaults and privacy violations before and after communities in Massachusetts passed laws protecting transgender rights. The study demonstrated that in communities that have passed legislation protecting the rights of a transgender individual to use public facilities in accordance with their gender identity does not lead to an increase in reports of privacy violations or assaults. As such, I ask the Council to support the resolution you have in front of you, sponsored by Councilors Tantar and Khan, supporting a yes vote on question 3 to continue to ensure the continued protection and dignity and protection of the basic rights of all citizens of the Commonwealth, as is codified by the mission statement of the Newburyport Human Rights Commission and also in the city ordinance regarding the establishment of the HRC. And the mission statement briefly here is, it is the policy of the City of Newburyport to uphold the human rights of all persons in Newburyport and the free exercise and enjoyment of any rights and privileges secured by the constitutions and laws of the United States, the Commonwealth of and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. This policy shall ensure equal opportunity to each person regardless of race, color, religious creed, national origin, sex, age, ancestry, sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, marital, family, or military status, source of income, or disability, where unlawful discrimination against in housing, employment, education, and public accommodations. And then secondly, I'll be speaking as a citizen of Newburyport. I want to thank all the councilors here and all other city departments for their tireless and often thankless work regarding the retail cannabis zoning. As I've attended many of the forums and meetings on this subject, I applaud the hard work and research done on this subject and encourage the council and our citizens to allow the issue to be tackled without tackling the individuals who are working on this issue. For better or worse, cannabis is all around us. As a medical doctor, I see patients of all ages, from age 18 to greater than 80, from all walks of life who regularly use cannabis, whether intermittently or habitually. This includes professionals, educators, business people, teachers, students, cancer patients, homeless individuals, teenagers, other medical professionals, and even battered women living in shelters. One cannot profile a cannabis user. It is, for better or worse, ubiquitous. Regulating cannabis correctly will prevent illicit back alley sales of this substance. Regulation also needs to be combined with education, as it is all around us. Sweeping this issue under the rug and pretending that it doesn't exist in our community is a fallacy. We can actually structure host agreements to support education and additional security and policing as we as a community see fit. I personally did not vote yes on this issue, but I respect the democratic process and the majority that did vote yes. Your job, I feel that your job as our representatives is to zone this in the best way possible and to stress the need to regulate, educate, and discuss cannabis with our community and especially our youth. It is in the best interest of our community to look this issue in the eye, to not judge, and to provide the entire community with the tools needed to make wise individual decisions, whether it relates to cannabis, alcohol, or any other important decision. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jessica Amorosino, I believe.
Yes.
Did I get it?
Yeah.
Ooh, got lucky.
Hi, my name is Jessica Amorosino, and I am a pediatrician, mother, resident of 238 High Street. And I'm just here to add my 2 cents regarding the ongoing topic of retail sales of marijuana in our city. I just want to make sure, as a physician and scientist and professional who actually helps individuals live healthy lives with less dependence on chronic medications and substance use, that council members, business people, and the general public just fully understand that any changes or decisions in marijuana-related policy discussions made will have a significant unintended and potentially long-term consequence for our children and future generations to come. I'm not sure how much time is spent on the science and medicine of how marijuana affects our children, but I just wanted to share with you a statement that was put out by the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry in 2017 that basically says, you know, whether a city allows restricted, unrestricted, any kind of increased access, retail access to marijuana, even just to adults age 21 and over, what we are going to see is likely decreased teen perception of marijuana's harmful effects, increased marijuana use amongst parents and caretakers, increased adolescent access to marijuana, which will all then likely increase the rates of adolescent marijuana use and associated problems. Furthermore, increasing marijuana access to pregnant adults will raise additional concerns regarding future infant, child, and adolescent development. If you're not already aware, our local community hospital is a special care nursery dedicated to newborns withdrawing from illicit substances their mothers took during pregnancy. Marijuana use during pregnancy is directly linked to premature births, problems with brain development, and stillbirths. We as physicians are fully aware that adolescents in particular are specifically vulnerable to marijuana's many known adverse effects. 1 in 16 users develops a marijuana abuse disorder that often involves drug tolerance, withdrawal, and continued use despite associated impairments. Heavy use during adolescence is associated with increased incidence or worsened course of mood disorders and other substance use disorders. We have concrete data and evidence to show that marijuana negatively affects adolescent cognition, behavior, and brain development that may have immediate and long-term implications. If you're unaware, the short-term implications include increased car accidents amongst teen users, increased sexual victimization, academic failure. Long-term effects include lasting decline in intelligence measures, long-term addiction, psychosocial and occupational impairments. Youth under age 18 do not seem to have a say in much these days, but they sure do have to deal with the many unintended negative consequences of adult business decisions. And it's the type of thing that you just can't throw money at to fix. And that's all I have to share today. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask all the speakers to please adhere to our 2-minute warning. I've been trying to give you a T when time is up. Next up is Jake King.
Hi. Good evening, everybody, counselors, ladies, gentlemen in the room. Jake King, I proudly live and reside in Ward 3. Moved here about 8 years ago with my young family. It's been nothing but fantastic. Great people in this community. We love what we've experienced over our first 8 years here. My discussion today, my 2 minutes, is going to be relevant, obviously, to what Jessica was just discussing, the relevancy of pot shops here in Newburyport. I thought that it would be important to read a couple of testimonials from 2 business owners. I did share this amongst the group earlier, but there's folks here that may not have seen these testimonies, and then I'll comment afterwards. And this is from Miss Deirdre with Acting Out down at the Tannery. Dear Jake, the discussion about placing a pot store at the Tannery is extremely concerning. While I am not in favor of having a pot store anywhere in Newburyport, the mere suggestion that the Tannery is a viable location is illogical. One of the reasons we chose to locate our business in the Tannery is because it's a safe place, a place where children can come and create, whether it be theater, dance, art, music. The feeling of community and the connection at the Tannery is important. Parents feel safe having their children walking from class to class and spending time with friends at the bookstore and cafe. Locating a pot shop at the Tannery would certainly impact the businesses that cater to children and families negatively. Please let me know if we can share these thoughts more broadly at tomorrow's meeting. Bess Deirdre, owner of Acting Out. And a shorter testimonial from Lydia and Lowell, owners of Funway Learning Center right around the corner from here. Hi Jake, thanks for your email and your kind words regarding Funway. Unfortunately, we're out of state for the meeting tomorrow night. We both would not want to see recreational marijuana retail stores downtown at the Tannery and agree with the recommendation to create a public ballot question if possible. And I'd also agree with that as well. In 2016, we all in the general election voted yes or no, and I can assure you that many people I've talked to over the last couple of weeks, a yes vote today would not hold water. That would be more likely a no, recognizing that there could be pot shops here in Newburyport. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Stephen Delisle.
Good evening, councilors. I'm Stephen Delisle. I live at 195 High Street in Newburyport, and I am here because I'm concerned that the reliance on the mere zoning options that have been discussed over the many weeks will be insufficient with respect to the Cannabis Control Commission and some of the literature that the Cannabis Control Commission has come out with in the past. In fact, the Market Participation Subcommittee of the Cannabis Control Commission has come out with or discussed among themselves a number of recommendations, and I'll read them for you. The CCC should issue on-site consumption and limit use licenses. These licenses should cater to small businesses, including but not limited to yoga studios, massage therapies, on-site consumption bars, wellness centers, coffee shops and bistros, art galleries, and should include any small business where cannabis products or services that include cannabis comprise at least 51% of their sales. Recommendation 2, the CCC should develop a minimum threshold for business to apply to become an on-site consumption licensee. Recommendation 3, the CCC should provide framework for special exceptions for clubs, hotels, restaurants, and any other applicant the CCC feels is appropriate. Recommendation 4, the CCC should create social consumption bring your own cannabis license with low barriers to entry. Recommendation 5, the CCC should not create additional barriers for full participation from small businesses. And finally, recommendation 6, the CCC should create as many pathways for small business licensing that do not trigger the 20% restriction enacted by some municipalities. My concern is that the zoning discussions that we've had here will not limit this issue, and this is only the entryway to a much larger problem that could arise. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Lynn Shao.
Hi, my name is Lynn Scow. I live at 75 High Street. The council's heard from me before on this issue. I'm here to speak against locating retail recreational use marijuana shops in Newburyport. I think the first thing I'd ask the council today is to look seriously at extending the moratorium for another 6 months. I think that the general public is just getting attuned to this issue, and there's a lot of uproar about it. And I think that as tired as you are with dealing it, we're just beginning to deal with it, and we're not tired. I think the second thing is, in terms of the public just getting to know about it, the public really wants a vote on this. I know I've heard a lot of people say in this forum that the public has already decided. The public voted for a referendum that was based on whether or not pot should be legalized in Massachusetts. It did not vote for whether or not to locate retail marijuana shops in Newburyport. The referendum question specifically left the issue of zoning and whether there would be shops to the towns and the cities to decide. We have not yet been given a voice to do that, the public in this town. And I can tell you, and I know that you're starting to hear from people who did vote yes on the question, that do not want the shops located. As a matter of fact, I haven't heard anybody come to this forum and advocate for locating a shop in their backyard. Everybody I've heard in this forum that has asked to locate a retail marijuana shop is for a place that is not near their homes. So I think you really need to reconsider whether Newburyporters really want it here at all. And the third question I'd like to ask the president as to why Councilor Vogel has not been disqualified from this question. I read his position paper. He's clearly in favor of locating shops downtown because of the impact he feels it will have on business traffic. He has 3 businesses in downtown Newburyport, including coffee shops that the Cannabis Commission is encouraging.
I'm going to rule that portion of your testimony out of order. We're aware of our responsibilities. We take them seriously. And if a member is compromised in some way, they're required to disclose any compromising information to members before voting on a matter, and if it seems appropriate, to seek the advice of the Ethics Commission.
And has that been done?
I believe it has. And if it has not, the avenue to pursue such a claim or a charge of someone acting inappropriately is with the Ethics Commission, the State Ethics Commission, not with our body. We don't police one another, per se, and you can understand why.
So you have no obligation to find out whether or not that question has been answered?
We have an obligation to hear one another and to act on the advice of one another based on the facts that are before us. It is the obligation of the individual to act in accordance with the ethical rules that bind us to what we're doing. If you object to the way someone is behaving, you should pursue that with the State Ethics Commission, not with this body.
Thank you for your advice. I will do so.
Thank you. I believe the first name is Josh Brumfield.
Thank you. Just want to thank the City Council and specifically AFROS for taking the time to speak about this issue. I know you guys have worked really hard on this. I live at 75 High Street. I'm an orthopedic surgeon. We have 4 children, and I've been coaching youth sports in Newburyport for 12 years. And in fact, just had football practice, and we already have some issues with kids on the 7th and 8th grade football teams with vaping and other drugs that we've had to suspend children for. So I think one of the issues really is about the children and having access to marijuana and seeing it in front of us. I did vote no for the question initially, just for full disclosure. I think there are just a few things I'd ask. One is, again, I think it's reasonable to consider extending the moratorium to have more people involved. we didn't know about this really, and we should have, till about a week or so ago, and I think a lot of people are in that boat. And I think most of the people that are in that boat would rather not have retail shops in town. I've spoke to a lot of people that voted yes on the question of whether marijuana should be essentially decriminalized, but none of those folks had any idea that they were voting yes to having retail shops in Newburyport. So the second thing I'd say is that we should have another question on the ballot specifically asking that question for the voters, and I don't see a negative to doing that. And the third is it seems like we need to work on dealing with the zoning issue either way. And I would say that we want to keep marijuana as far away from the kids as we can. We know that downtown and the tannery are high traffic areas for these kids. We want to maintain at least the federal and state zone in terms of the 500-foot zone to avoid any of these shops going in near schools, parks, dance studios, music studios, and other areas where these kids are. So I think there are really three things that I'm asking for. Extend the moratorium, zone it out of the downtown and tannery areas, and keep the buffer, and then if we can have a ballot question, I think that's what the majority of people would like. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lauren Aramo.
I think I'm here to speak related to the resolution for question 3. I think there are many things that come before you that are complex and nuanced and have many perspectives, but this is not one of those things. When it comes to treating all people with respect and dignity and granting all people the same equal rights, there is no nuance, there is no complexity, it's simply the right thing to do. In my classroom, I often tell my 5th graders that you don't get points for doing the right thing. It's expected that you do the right thing. But in this current political climate, I think it's important to celebrate when a political body is doing the right thing. And so I appreciate that you brought this resolution up, and I urge the council to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. And finally, Linda Lambert.
I hope our city council will act in the best interest of all its citizens and consider restrictive zoning for retail marijuana. Because legalization passed in Newburyport, I feel the city council is obligated to get zoning in place because I believe in the democratic process. That same obligation is called for on the other side. The vote was close. Over 5,100 voted no. As an obligation to those that voted no, it should be zoned where it poses the least impact, the least threat, where retail would be the most invisible and inconspicuous to the public, where it would need to be tolerated by the fewest number of people. We have heard much testimony about the traffic circle and Story Ave having much less public impact than downtown or the tannery. These locations represent compromise acceptable by both sides of the voting public. The majority just don't want it downtown or at the tannery, where foot traffic would make retail ultimately very visible. I ask our councilors who have the best interest of their wards at heart to look at the larger picture and vote with that larger public in mind. I know you are struggling, but this is not a ward issue. This is an every citizen issue. With all due respect, could you consider all of Newburyport's citizens over the smaller ward representation when you vote tonight? I also ask with due respect to our councilors who favor downtown or tannery locations to please consider the public testimony and the public polls. The majority don't want it there, mixing with downtown foot traffic. Do you really believe that a downtown store will have an invisible presence with pedestrians on their doorstep? Foot traffic is not the same as the drive-by invisibility you would get in the traffic circle or Story Ave. Finally, your vote should be made with the citizens' best interest in mind, not the best interests of retailers. It would be very disappointing if you cannot reach a compromise tonight. If we move to a ballot vote, I will be voting no to retail, and I don't think I am unique in that commitment. I believe many previously yes votes will be at risk and follow in voting no to retail. You don't have to go back to the polls to know that the community would rather have no retail than retail all over. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That concludes our public comment period. So I'm going to ask the clerk to, no, first we have the mayor. I'm sorry, Mayor. Mayor Holliday,
Thank you.
for your update.
Good evening, Council President Collin, members of the City Council, members of the those who are watching at home. As many of the speakers tonight have said, I would like to also commend you on the many, many, many hours and meetings and diligence you have placed on the discussion of zoning and placement of retail marijuana. I can't thank you enough for the due diligence you've done. I have been in contact with many, many residents across the city and am feeling very strongly about an anti-downtown placement of pot shops, and would ask you to continue thinking about that, considering the views you've heard tonight also. I'm happy tonight to give you an update on the Brown School and Youth Services. I haven't talked about this in a while because it was really clear from the council that there was no desire to have any discussion about the future of the Brown School until we found a new site for youth services. For several months, I have been in conversation with the National Guard and the building, the Emergency Operations Building, which is on Low Street, not the opening, Powder House, the other Emergency Ops Building, which we use only a couple times a year when we open it up during significant weather events. The National Guard has agreed to sell that building to the city, but the obstacle is that there are 5 pieces of property the National Guard wants to dispense of, and that the law currently requires that the sale of those buildings, the proceeds go into the general fund. The National Guard wants the proceeds to go into the National Guard, which makes sense. It was a bill filed by our governor. I've spoken to the lieutenant governor about it. The Senate has passed it. It's now in House Ways and Means. I would appreciate if people might reach out to our state rep and any other reps and just ask them if they could push this through. It's a little more difficult in informal session, but after that bill is passed, then we have agreed that we would pay for the survey and the appraisal because we can expedite that process, and we're hearing it's about 25 cents on a dollar for a municipal sale of the property. There's still a lot of work that would need to happen there, and obviously we want to get a good sense of the condition of the building before we would move forward on that, but I thought you would like to hear that update. Mass DOT, we met with Paul Stedman, who is the District 4 Highway Director, and Frank Zuzewski, the Project Development Engineer, to talk about 3 projects that we are working on. One is the closeout of the Clipper City Rail Trail Part 2, which would, we intend to close out that contract by the end of the calendar year. New striping will happen from Joppa along Water Street to go in at the end of Lime Street on the other side of the wastewater treatment plant operations building as the temporary alternative for the rail trail. We also will have the contractor put up erosion control so the PCBs will not migrate into the river. We will close out that, and I've already begun conversations regarding, we've put together a letter to the Lieutenant Governor. I've also had a direct conversation with her about releasing the cleanup money that's in the environmental bond bill so that we can begin to clean up that site. And we also have $100,000 from the Brownfields grant at the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission that we lose June 30th if we don't spend it during this next fiscal year. So we're hoping we can get that done expediently. We're also asking that Mass DOT also offer their support to the administration regarding moving forward on this cleanup. Safe Routes to School is at 100% design. There is some concerns about some of the grading of High Street that was picked up by our engineering staff upon review of the design, and that has been sent back to Mass DOT to take a second look at that. We talked about the Route 1 traffic circle. We do have an earmark again for work on the Route 1 traffic circle. We also have $75,000 to work on some design. Mass DOT has hired a consultant firm that is actively looking at options for the Route 1 traffic circle and will have their report to Mass DOT by the end of December, so there seems to be no reason for us to move forward on using our $75,000 until we have a sense of what this design team is putting forward, and I certainly will share all of that with you. Combined sewer, stormwater CSO activations that a lot of information been in the paper, letters to the editor regarding what's happening. These are communities who are north of us, starting in Manchester, Nashua, and Lawrence, Lowell, and Haverhill. All are under federal administrative consent orders to separate their stormwater from their sewer lines. These are incredibly expensive, we're talking multi-millions of dollars in order to get this done. But we're at the point where I know the end users, being Amesbury, Salisbury, Newburyport, are pretty frustrated with the increase because of the increased rain and the activations that continue to happen in the river. DEP came and did a presentation to the mayors and managers. What I sent to you, I believe that was in either late April or early May, and the Merrimack River Watershed Council came and presented last week to me. They are coming tomorrow to meet with the mayors and managers to talk to them about that. And we have to come together as a community and decide what it is our response. One of the things that's most important to me is notification to residents. There's a bill before the legislature which is lingering, hasn't been able to move forward. We need to know in a very timely manner so that we can do our testing. We did work with the Gulf of Maine Institute several years ago, and kids were putting up signs down at Cashman Park regarding the level of bacteria in the river. So there's a lot more that has to happen in this area. I've also sent both sets of slides to the governor and lieutenant governor, asking them to sort of give us some guidance as a community who's dealing with this. More to come on that. The mayors and managers meeting last month was in Braintree. Mayor Joe Sullivan hosted, and Commissioner Marty Suderberg was the guest keynote speaker and spent time updating information on waste and recycling. And things do not look really terrific in terms of where we're going in this area, so we're really pushing as an organization, the Mass Municipal Association, to try and get a better strategic plan from DEP in terms of what's happening in terms of waste. Mental health services, this is something we've been trying to work on for years in terms of putting it into our schools. The Beacon Coalition has a MH provider group that they've been meeting with and have consistently stated that we do not have enough mental health supports for families, particularly lower income families and youth in our city. We were very fortunate to meet with the Home for Little Wanderers. The executive director lives in the South End and brought her team of staff to come and meet with us. They have expanded into schools. They have a North Shore division, and we are actively pursuing entering into a partnership with them. We also met with Pettingill House and are looking at trying to increase social work services in youth services, so there'll be more on that coming also. We also finally received the Merrimack River Beach Alliance meeting. We had the Army Corps of Engineers come up and give us a presentation on the long-awaited, referred to as the DOT study, which is analysis of the shoreline change on northern Plum Island. Essentially they provided a synopsis of past studies and, discussing the cyclical nature of accretion and erosion, and things ultimately stabilize, and recommended some nearshore placement on the northeast section of Plum Island, as well as a 204 study which goes to dredging. So we will continue doing work in that area. There are information on 204 studies posted on this district website, which I gave you the address for that. The other thing too in your packet tonight, which I didn't put in the update, but I will when I post it online, was I was very, very pleased that Newbury has voted to support paying for the replacement of the pumps at the Olga lift station. Provided you an extensive write-up working with Jamie Tuccolo on that. They're covering 60% because that's their ownership of the island, and would be covering 40%, and that would come out of the settlement fund, which would be under $100,000. And this is really critical. I ask that you move on that as quickly as possible because of the lead time to order the pumps, and we'd like them in as quickly as possible. Senior Community Center had a wonderful event where they recognized all the donors who contributed to the funding gap when we opened up the center 3 years ago. It was a really nice celebration. Also last week, Lieutenant Governor Polito was here presenting the Y with a $600,000 check for the Community Scale Housing Initiative Program. Again, it'll be 10 affordable units that will be built on-site with David Hall's Hillside Sustainability Community. Water Department, we had an emergency response training on last Friday with AECOM. There's a whole series of trainings they do, and we've also updated some of our protocol. It was very worthwhile. I understand that the auxiliary Coast Guard building will be coming out of committee. I thank you for that. This has been a long process for us to look at preserving and protecting and finding a better use in collaboration with the Coast Guard Auxiliary, and I appreciate your work on that RFP and look forward to being able to get that on the street. I also wanted to let you know that there is a legislative breakfast that we will be hosting on 10/9 for elected officials at 8:30 at City Hall Auditorium.
19.
What did I say? Oh, yes, thank you. The 19th. Yes, that would have been hard, yes. And finally, just information that we are instituting early voting again, starting on October 22nd through November 2nd. That will be here at City Hall. Check the website for exact times. And the deadline to register for vote in this November election is October 17th. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Any questions from the members? Oh, Councilor Shand, I'm sorry, I didn't see you. Go.
With Safe Routes to School being at 100%, is there a plan to have any more public meetings with abutters and neighbors on High Street to review the final plan?
Absolutely. Yeah, we are still waiting on, we need a letter from the Historic Commission for the state to file their 106 study, which we still have been waiting since July from the Historic Commission for that letter, because that's going to delay us if we don't get that letter soon. And we are waiting for feedback on the grade issues that we presented to Mass DOT, and then Jordy Vining is in charge of this project, which is wonderful, and he will begin working directly with the butters also in terms of sidewalks, brick, and all of those kinds of things too. So yes, we will have another public meeting as soon as we get the rest of that information back from Mass DOT.
Councilor Ackerman?
Yeah, also, I didn't have any questions, but I wrote down, I caught the 60% from Newbury. I just wanted to thank you for that. I saw that. If you hadn't mentioned it, I was going to. That's great. And also, thanks on the Route 1 traffic circle. Let us know if we can help.
Right,
Thank
absolutely.
you.
So those projects are moving forward, at least in concept, so pleased about that. So thank you. Have a good meeting.
Thank you, Mayor.
I'll ask the clerk to walk us through the consent agenda. The consent agenda consists of the following. Approval of the minutes for September 24th. There are 3 transfers. Transfer 27 is the sale of municipal equipment, $18,000 to school tech upgrade, same amount to go to Budget and Finance. Transfer 28, legal settlements, $22,500 to Reservation Terrace Wall, same amount, again to Budget and Finance. Transfer 29, Plum Island Utility Trust Fund, $99,197 to Olga Way Pump Replacement, same amount, Budget and Finance. There is one communication 89 from Steve Comley, letter to City Council to be received and filed. The first appointment 58, has been removed at the request of Councilor Khan to be taken up in the regular agenda. Appointment 59, Scott Hanley, 1 Milk Street, Tree Commission until 11/1/2021. There's one reappointment, Paul Bevelak, 126 Merrimack Street, Unit 3, to the Tree Commission, 11/1/2021.
Motion to approve as amended.
Second. Moved and seconded. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Good. That ends the consent agenda. We have the mayor's update. What's the will of the council?
Second.
Moved and seconded to receive and file. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? It is received and filed. Appointments.
Actually, communication 90, the late file.
Late file. I stand corrected.
Communication 90 is a late file. It is the Harborside Half Marathon and 5K. You'll see the matter before you with sign-offs. There is no insurance yet. I am promised, or was promised today, the insurance budget.
Motion to refer to public safety. Second. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor of referring this matter to public safety say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Thank you.
I might comment on this. I sent the applicant, and this is for the benefit of the committee, a message explaining our process and the necessity to submit in a timely manner an application for any such event. We've had a problem with this, and that's why I'm saying it publicly. We've had a problem with events coming to us at the last minute, or applications coming to us at the last minute over this past year. I didn't need to go through that recent history. It's a problem. It causes some disruption in the agencies that have to accommodate these events, and it's really disrespectful of all the public employees of the city who have to scramble their lives to make do for these particular celebrations in some cases, fundraisers in others, athletic events, whatever you want to have, whatever you want to include in that list. So we have some matters before us to consider changes to our procedures, and I hope you'll consider carefully where we go next with respect to all the events that are being that ask to be accommodated by the city. Okay, where are we, Richard?
Mr. President, was that voted on? I know it was referred to public safety. Was a vote taken?
Yes. So it has been taken. That was just my editorial comment on it.
Right next, Mr. President, is the second reading of the following appointments, if I might.
And go ahead.
Appointment 52, Jennifer Groskin, 11 Myrtle Ave, Human Rights Commission, until 3/31/2019. Appointment 53, Matt Ellsworth, 38 Plummer Avenue, Parks Commission, Atkinson, 5/1/2020. Appointment 54, Charles Griffin, 3 Vernon Street, Parks Commission, Bartlett Mall, 5/1/2019. Appointment 55, Ann Legassi, 1 Piper's Quarry, Parks Commission, 5/1/2022. Appointment 56, Karen Popkin, 49 Boardman Street, Parks Commission, 5/1/2021. And Kim Turner, appointment number 57, 27 High Street, Parks Commission, 5/1/2023.
Motion to approve on second reading?
Is this collectively?
Yes, please.
It is. So then it'll require a roll call vote. These being a second reading. Let's go.
Councilor Vogel?
Yes.
Councilor Zede?
Yes.
Councilor Devlin?
Yes.
Councilor Earls?
Yes.
Councilor Eigenman?
Yes.
Councilor Junta?
Yes.
Councilor Khan?
Yes.
Councilor O'Brien?
Yes.
Councilor Shan?
Yes.
Councilor Tonto?
Yes.
Councilor Con?
Yes. Orders?
Mr. President, we have,
Excuse me.
the
Excuse me.
appointment-
I'm going to recognize Councilor Khan. Councilor Khan.
Well, sorry, the city clerk was going to say it, but I want to, sorry. Thank you, Mr. President. I want to make a motion to receive and file appointment 59 for the Human Rights Commission. The applicant has withdrawn, so I'd like to. Sorry, 58. Sorry.
58.
Yeah, sorry, appointment 58.
58.
Second.
The motion is to receive and file that appointment. I have a second. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Okay, orders.
First matter before the council is a tabled Order 58 CPA project for Slate Roof Custom House, Mr. President.
Do you want to walk through it, or shall I walk through it?
Did you want to mention that you have selected a special counsel? The special counsel has rendered an opinion which just came in, frankly, an hour ago, and it needs to be vetted. It's 3 pages. It's an interesting opinion. And what we talked about, Mr. President, was I would make a copy of it and circulate it among the counselors. It is a legal opinion. I guess one would say it's work product at this point.
Let me explain further to the counselors. The firm we've selected is Pickett, I'm sorry, was Pickett Miyares. Miyares and Harrington. And Councilor Miyares was recommended to us. There were 2 counsel recommended to us through the association that governs city solicitors. I happen to know Mr. Miyares, having worked with him in a previous life, and I think he will serve us well. We have this opinion. It came to us so late, I didn't think we could reasonably sift through it and have a rational discussion about this matter. So my recommendation to the councilors, you will do what you want, is to take this matter off the table, put it back on the table, The clerk will submit to you this second opinion on whether or not we can actually take it up, and then you'll do what you will at our next general meeting. And I'll open myself to questions from the councilors if you have any.
Motion
Councilor
to
Turner?
remove from the table. Second.
Discussion. I guess there is no discussion, is there, on the tabling?
Well-
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No.
Motion to table.
Second.
Moved and seconded to table. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
One no. Thank you. We'll be prepared at our next meeting. Order 64.
Order 64 is resolution on question 3. It is somewhat long with maybe 7 whereas. Would the sponsoring counselors like me to read it, or do you want to refer it to committee? Or?
I don't think it's necessary to me.
Maybe just to resolve the last two?
Yes, the last portion perhaps.
It's entitled "A Resolution Reaffirming Current City of Newburyport and Massachusetts Non-Discrimination Laws, Prohibiting Discrimination, Places of Public Accommodation on the Basis of Gender, Identity, and Gender Expression." The resolve is, we, the members of the City Council, do hereby express our commitment to defend transgender equality in Newburyport, and will hereby pledge to sign on to Freedom for All Massachusetts Yes on 3 coalition to say clearly, discrimination has no place in Massachusetts and no place in Newburyport. That would be signed by all members. It's jointly submitted, Councilors Tantar and Khan.
Motion to refer to the Committee on General Governance.
Second.
Move to general government. Discussion.
Just very briefly, I did appreciate the public comment that were made earlier. I won't repeat them. This is necessary because there is an effort to reverse the bill that passed the legislature and was on July 7th, 2016, and was signed by the governor on July 8th, 2016. It is endorsed, the yes on question 3 position has been endorsed by every New England sports team, including the Boston Red Sox, the Massachusetts Chiefs of Police Association, the Massachusetts Coalition Against Sexual Assault and Domestic Violence, and the Massachusetts Parent-Teacher Association. Is endorsed by Harvard University and MIT, and communities that have endorsed it, Boston, Cambridge, Somerville, Melrose, Arlington, Lexington, Worcester, and Salem. It is totally consistent with what this body has passed in terms of the mission of the Human Rights Commission. I urge that the Committee on General Governments, the government act quickly and get this before the election in November. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Additional discussion, questions? Hearing none, all those in favor of referring to committee, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. There we go. Order 65.
It's a resolution entitled "Expressing the City of Newburyport's Opposition to the Privatization of Custom House and Associated Land." The resolve is that opposition to privatization of the Newburyport Custom House property. The City of Newburyport expresses its opposition in principle to the privatization of the Newburyport Custom House property. 2, the City of Newburyport requests that the Newburyport Redevelopment Authority rescind its RFP and proceed with the tenets of the 2017 Central Waterfront Resolution calling for a transfer of the land to the city for its subsequent committal to a 99-year lease to the Custom House Maritime Museum for a term of 99 years. Jointly submitted, Councilors Zeed, Eigenman, and Connell.
Motion to refer to Planning and Development.
Second. Discussion, Councilor Zeed.
Thank you. I've been kind of a broken record on this, so I don't need to speak too much on it, but the NRA is actually meeting next door at 7 p.m. with what I consider to be an improperly posted meeting since no agenda was made public. But the idea is, I guess, that they may be taking a vote on the land disposition next door. So this issue is not going away, and I thought, as one of the sponsors, that it made sense that we handle all land disposition. So I think we should have a say on this one, particularly because changing course on this would be effectively changing the position of the city council that has existed for the last 47 years, which is that public buildings belong to the public. So we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Thank you, Counselor. Additional comments? Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. There are no ordinances, so we'll move to committee items, and I'll entertain a motion. Oh, we have a late file. I apologize. I stand corrected twice.
Ordinance 66 is a non-exclusive use easement. It's related to the Chestnut Hancock Condominium Trust, 434 through 436 Hancock Street. Must be 3436 Hancock Street. And it is accompanied with a plan, and it is too long to read.
Motion to refer to planning and development. Second.
And there's a second. Counselor Zede.
Just my brief apologies for the late file. It was a timing thing. I got it on Friday, but it was a condition of the approval for the project, so you'll hear more about it in a couple weeks. But that's the reason for the late file.
So we have to first approve the emergency preamble, or can we do it in unbound? Just refer.
No, just apologizing for the late file. That's all.
Got it. Gotcha. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No, it's referred. Thank you, councilors.
Thank you.
Next, I think we can move to committee items.
Yeah, did you want to take a?
We will. I believe there's a motion regarding committee items. Councilor Z.
Yes, I'd like to motion to waive the rules so that we can bump planning and development up to the top of the list for some items that are of great intrigue tonight.
So this would start us on planning and development, because there are a lot of people who are here particularly interested in some items that are in planning and development. They can hear what we have to say about it, and then enjoy the rest of their evenings. Hopefully the Red Sox will win. There was a second. It was Councilor Vogel, Councilor Tantar. I heard something on the left. Thank you. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor of waiving the rules, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Okay, so we'll start with planning and development.
Motion to remove ordinance 24, zoning amendment, marijuana retail sales locations.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion.
Point of order.
Councilor Devlin.
I once again have to recuse myself due to conflicts with the current client.
Have a good 3 hours.
Lots of reading material this time.
Watch the game, but more important.
Thank
you, It should be quick and easy.
We didn't vote yet. We got to vote to bring it out.
I'm sorry?
Motion removed on the floor.
Yes.
I know. We're whispering so we can't hear.
Oh.
We have a motion seconded to remove from committee the ordinance 24. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. It's out.
Motion to approve is amended in committee on October 9th.
Second. There is a second. Discussion. Councilor Igerman.
Thank you. On your desk is a copy of what came out of the committee earlier tonight after last week's meetings of the whole council. The committee voted to recommend approval of this proposal, which is 2 pages, 2 to 1. Councilor Junta of Ward 5 voted no. Under the proposal, retail marijuana would be permissible in both of our business districts, which are designated B1 in our zoning code. Those are our 2 car-oriented shopping areas, one centered on the Route 1 traffic circle and the other along Story Avenue. The city has 2 other types of business district right now. There's a B2, which is the downtown business district, and the B3, the so-called neighborhood business district. That includes the Tannery, Pond Street CVS, Washington Street facing Immaculate Conception School, and other miscellaneous. Only B1 is proposed in this document. Proposal would not allow marijuana stores in the B2, the B3, or other districts of the city, residential, or the business park. For both B1 zones, proposal before you includes a 100-foot minimum distance or buffer between public entrances to a marijuana retailer and any residential district. Some parts of buildings at Port Plaza's southeasterly edge are within 100 feet of a residential zone, but their entrances are not. I want to make that clear. None of the Panera Bread building is within 100 feet at all, but as we discussed last week at the meetings, the cemeteries on Story Avenue are slated for rezoning from residential to agricultural conservation. It's not in the city's interest to have them be developed with housing. So there will soon be no buffer on the Story Avenue frontage for Port Plaza if this passes. The proposal keeps unchanged the 500-foot buffer for pre-existing child-related uses that was passed with the new marijuana zoning section. That's Roman numeral 31. We passed that in May. Part of that was also the marijuana production rules for the use tables. Just as in the proposal from our committee that fell short, a couple votes short on September 10, the distance is measured, again, from entrances to the protected uses. For example, pedestrian entrances to Kelleher Park, which is open air, are located within 500 feet of the Eastern Bank building at 17 Story Street. That's a drive-through bank. So 17 Story Street, if this passes, would not be eligible for marijuana retail. A counterexample would be the next row of buildings over. Those would be in play. As before, down at Route 1, the buffer from the Knoll Edge daycare is 250 feet. That's what we had voted on back in September. That does not change. It's half the distance. The theory being it's a much busier street, and practically it is sufficient distance. Proposal before you would also cap the total number of marijuana retailers citywide at 20% of off-premises liquor licenses. That was discussed at length at our last meeting and last week. By state law, that is the tightest cap that is allowed without a vote of residents, either at a general or a special election. You cannot go less than that. Currently, there are 9 off-premises liquor licenses in Newburyport. The proposal has a rounding rule, so you would round up. 1.8 is rounded up to 2. Finally, a proposal comes with a cleanup provision that would delete from the zoning code the temporary moratorium on recreational marijuana passed in May. Depending on how things go, I may speak again, but that is our committee's final and best effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor.
I actually don't have a copy, so Andy, do you have an extra copy of the, thank you.
Good. Further comment? Councilor Earls.
Actually, a question, if I may, just for clarification. On Low Street, south of Low Street, I can't quite make out because the map is not the greatest printing. Is that allowable, the businesses south of Low Street?
Councilor Agaman?
It's a good question. It would be allowable. My understanding is that none of those buildings, so coming from, starting roughly at the Giuseppe's restaurant and then going east to the ice cream place, none of those would be buffered out. They would all be available for retail marijuana. I could be corrected by the planner.
Further comment? Councilor Vogel.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a couple of things. I've been a councilor at large now for, in my 5th year, and I've served city council 4 years prior to that, so it's been 9 years. And as a business owner, when I first got elected at large as a business owner, I was required by the State Ethics Commission to put a statement on file, and that statement is on file at the clerk's office. In fact, the clerk has helped me, in fact, over the past years, continue to work on it. I am well aware of my ethics, and I'm well aware of what the Ethics Commission has to say, and I constantly speak with the Ethics Commission. I will tell you I probably have spoken with the Ethics Commission 6 or 8 times since I've been a councilor at large, if not more, and sometimes hour-long conversations. In terms of this particular issue, I have made it clear from the very beginning that I have absolutely no interest in being involved in marijuana. And on record in this body is a proposal that I did put out that included the downtown district and very specifically excluded locations of my businesses. I did suggest Pleasant Street, but I suggested that they be west of Hales Court, which did not include my business. And I actually excluded any business with a Market Square address, which is where Soufflés is located. So I purposefully, not only because they're my businesses, but I don't think that it's appropriate that they be located there, excluded those particular areas when I proposed it to this council. So that is on record. I am happy to talk to the Ethics Commission anytime about any perceived ethics violations that I might have. That being said, my position was made clear in the article in the paper. If you haven't had an opportunity to read it, it was in Monday's paper. As an I see it, I thought it was just an effort to clear up a couple of misconceptions, namely that we have not decriminalized marijuana. We've actually made marijuana illegal and have been directed to treating it as alcohol or at liquor stores. I find this effort here to be satisfactory. I'd like to move this on. I appreciate all of the effort, all of the feedback both ways. I'm going to vote no. I'm going to vote yes. And I do accept this. I'm sorry to give you a heart attack. Yeah, it would be fun maybe to vote no, but I won't. I'll vote in favor of it. I'd like to move this along, and I thank you all.
Thank you, Councilor. Additional comment? Councilor Tantar.
No, I was one of the councilors that asked for reconsideration, and I want to thank members of the Planning and Development Committee for all the time they've spent on this. I know you spent a lot of time before I asked for reconsideration. At that time, I had asked that we spend more time on it, which I know was difficult for some people. I think that we have allowed more people in the public to learn about this, to articulate their opinions. I think characteristic of a compromise is that nobody is happy, and I think essentially everyone has given up something to come up with this compromise, and I think it's in the best interest of the city to vote yes, and I will.
Thank you, Councilor. Further comment? Councilor Genta.
So I voted no against this in committee, and for obvious reasons. My ward voted against the sale of recreational marijuana, and now we are dropping it right in my ward, which is a damn shame, to be quite honest with you. Our last subcommittee meeting, for folks that are watching at home, we had 250-foot buffers around my neighborhoods, and now those have been reduced to 100-foot. I have 96 families that live directly in the middle of this zone with zero buffer. I can't speak for Councilor O'Brien. Councilor O'Brien has both Clipper Way and Woodman Way inside the zone. I mean, yeah, I know we all want to slap each other on the back and say, wow, what a great compromise this is. I can't imagine how many families we've put in this zone. This is not a great compromise. And in quite the reverse, I did vote in favor of the traffic circle just a few short weeks ago, and the reason is because I think it has the least impact on the city. There aren't any children congregating there. It's a business district where you would go in, purchase what you are there to purchase, and then you would leave and go home. In contrast to Story Avenue, which I would say is very much a family-oriented area between McDonald's, Papagino's, you can name all the stores, Kids Out Canning. And so I really have to question, is this really what we want on Story Avenue? I mean, I'm just so upset at this, I don't know what to say. This is exactly the opposite of what we should be doing. You know, with a 250-foot buffer, it gave you about 20 or so storefronts still on Story Avenue, but they weren't the storefronts that were right in front of you. But this maneuver in committee put all the storefronts that are right in front of you in play for the first time. So we went from a pretty bad proposal to a worse proposal. And it's going to pass in a few minutes. And, but I will be voting no.
Further discussion? Councilor Zede.
Well, first of all, I want to say with all due respect, I don't think the public comment questioning a counselor was against our rules, and I just wanted to register my disagreement that should have been gavelled down. 2 minutes, you can say whatever you want. If you want to come after one of us, unfortunately, that's just the nature of the job, and I'm not commenting on the actual comment itself. It's just my opinion. Strong believer in the First Amendment. So I wanted to say that, get it off my chest. As far as the matter at hand, I thought I wrote several different things about what I would say, but I think what I want to spend my time doing is trying to explain to people where the city council is in this whole mess, because this is a disaster, in my opinion, the way this has been rolled out. I know some councilors have strong opinions that the CCC has done a good job and the state's done a good job. I'm the polar opposite of that. So here's why we are where we are. In 2016, the ballot passes, okay? And then what happens is the CCC is formed, and they're supposed to come up with all these great regulations that are supposed to help us figure out what we're doing. For whatever reason, they're slow. And so all of a sudden, this timeline comes up that clearly nobody feels that they can meet. So everybody moves to a moratorium. Moratoriums are helpful in that they slow the process down and give you some time to think. The downside with the moratoriums is they have to go through the Attorney General. And the Attorney General has moved the bar several times as far as how far out they would approve a moratorium. So when we started, it was here. They'd only approve moratoriums up until this date. Then it became 12/30/119, and now from what I hear, the AG's office may be willing to accept moratoriums for a longer period of time. While this is all happening, the CCC is literally changing the regulations. So we're trying to do things, and they're publishing documents that at the same time we're trying to read and figure out what we are supposed to be doing. And then somewhere along that way as well, I kind of skipped over this, but the state legislature passes a law that says if you're a yes city, you can't ban anything in the city without a referendum. So your lowly city councilors, the 11 of us, are in the middle of this disaster. We are your local representatives. We are the closest to you, something I enjoy very much. But I just want folks to understand why we are in the position that we are. So the question we have now is we have a very difficult position. We have a moratorium expiring 12/31 that we may or may not be able to extend if we wanted to, because we don't know if the AG would approve it or not. We're a yes city, so we are basically, by what the state is telling us, the state legislature, is we're bound to zone this. That's sort of what they're implying when they say, you know, if you don't go to a referendum, the council can't turn things down. So I just thought it's important, no matter how anybody votes, you should understand the position the 11 of us are in, that we're trying to do this, and we're sort of have the least power and least control, but we're somehow have all these forces acting upon us from the outside. Okay, so now on to the actual zoning itself. I felt that we reached compromise 2 weeks ago when we had the traffic circle proposal. I voted for that. I felt we reached compromise when we did the 250-foot buffers, and I would have voted for that if it came up. And this one is basically at the very edge of my willingness to accept. And it's not with open arms. And I acknowledge the Ward 5 councilor's comments, and I think the whole thing is frustrating. But when I consider the alternative, which is that we could go to ballot with an unknown timeline, we could have a moratorium expire, it would be irresponsible not to at least zone something so something's in place, that at least we have some control. The parts of this proposal I like are the 20% cap. I think that's logical. As one of the public commenters made, who knows what the 20% cap is going to mean? But that's the problem we are living with, and that's why, as we did with cultivation, I think we made it as small as we could without essentially banning it. And I feel that we're trying to approach that same line here. And so it's not with great enjoyment that I say I support this, but I just consider the alternative, which is doing nothing, and I can't sleep with that. I can't allow January 1, 2019 to be a free-for-all. I know some other councilors may favor that more than I do, but I don't. So I think we need to get some zoning in place so that at least we have something to stand on. And if we want to continue the conversation, we can continue the conversation. But if we don't pass this, I fear the alternate is worse. And I will tell you this last piece. Typically with zoning, you need 8 votes to do something. You come here, folks come here and speak to us and say, I want to convince 8 of you to vote yes so that something will happen. In this case, because of the way the state's rewritten the law last year, we're in the opposite position. In other words, if 8 don't agree, then everything can happen. And as a local legislator, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard of, but that is the position we're in. So I hope people will understand that with a grain of salt, and I'm fine continuing the conversation, and if I'm open to anything, but for tonight, after many months of hard work, this is the only thing that we can come up with, warts and all, and I don't discount or throw away the Ward 5 councilors' comments, but that's where I stand.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Khan.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. Fellow councilors and members of the public, first of all, I want to thank everybody. This has been a tough, tough journey for all of us, and I definitely understand the councilor from Ward 5's concerns. I hear it, and it's something that I personally have been, since I knew this was coming to our city, when I went in January of this year to the Massachusetts Municipal Association meeting, where they talked about retail marijuana and yes cities, and what was a yes city and what that meant for your city. And I remember sitting there going, okay, so what are our options? And local control options were talked to with us. We could go back to ballot, we could do a moratorium, and we were sitting there going, taking notes, going, what could we do? What are our next steps? And we did that. And I really want to make a point of that. I'm really sorry that people are just finding out now. I don't know what else I could have done. We did a community forum. Once we introduced the moratorium and the ballot, it was clear when people came and the paper published it and everyone came forward saying, don't do that, we voted yes. I mean, we heard from so many people that we were like, okay, let's do the moratorium and give ourselves time. And in that time, I talked to people about community preparedness. So what we do today doesn't end here. Community preparedness needs to resonate deep inside. So the community forum we did had the police, Marshal Murray there, it had the school superintendent there, it had the planning director there. We had a whole panel of people available for questions. And how many people showed up? It was like maybe 100, 150. I asked PortMedia to also film it, and so it was on YouTube. It was available for people to watch. The school district email blast sent email blasts 3 times. I asked them, please send it out. It was June 19th. We did what we could. Then we did a survey. And so for those of you who may have seen, I tried to circulate a survey when I saw that we were trying to narrow down on where to zone it. And we had just the traffic circle as an option. And again, I heard from other people, we heard about visibility, concern from, yes, the over 50% that voted in favor. That was not a good feeling for people. I have to listen to the residents and constituents. I could do my part to educate, and I could do my job as a city councilor representing the voices here. This was not easy. I'll admit, this was not easy for us to do. This is a compromise, and I'm really happy, and I thank the Planning and Development Committee. I thank the Planning Board. I thank all Andy here from the Planning Director. This was not easy, and I'm going to support this compromise that we've reached. But again, I want to emphasize, we're not done today. We're not done with just zoning. There's a level of education. There's a level of looking at what Newburyport Youth Services does with their youth asset survey. That's a survey that they did, and they did focus groups with parents and kids. I didn't see many people there, but the kids spoke up about their fears. They spoke about what they have access to right now that they're worried about. Let's listen to them, and please, let's get involved.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Shand.
So, as my fellow ward councilor said earlier, I thought the traffic circle was a good compromise to start with. And I thought we had a good opportunity to expand after we had an opportunity to see what the Cannabis Control Commission was going to do over this next year. But we couldn't get 8 votes. And to the ward councilor's comments, it would have been irresponsible to do nothing. So what I will say to all the people who feel like they have just woken to what's going on, once, assuming we do pass this and people do start coming in to see if we have recreational shops, there is an opportunity to still continue speaking. Planning and Development Committee has to issue the special permit granting authority. So there will be plenty of opportunities to come out and speak your opinion about where these places are going to be located. So please, if we do pass it tonight, please stay engaged. Thank you.
Further discussion? Councilor O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. President. As someone who lived in this great city for 72 years and lived in Ward 6 for 42 years, I've seen big changes come in Ward 6. But when you come into Ward 6, the other side is Ward 5. You are entering Newburyport. When you come from 113, 95, you're entering the great city of Newburyport. We have the rail trail, the nature trail right there. But now with this here being, what's being proposed, you're going to have pot shops right as you come into the city of Newburyport. Ward 5 and Ward 6 have seen a hell of a lot of development. We've got a hospital or whatever going there, urgent care. We had to fight when CVS came in here because people wanted, they need to walk there. We want a walkway between Noble Street. That hasn't happened yet. You know, we got 3 supermarkets there. We got 2 supermarkets there. We got 3 malls there. And I think the people in Ward 5 and 6 have had enough. And then to see this, they have Clipper Way and Woodman Way and the thing, that's absurd. Absolutely absurd to have that as part of the project. And I wanted to put it down, put at the traffic circle. Definitely a proposal of that, but people in Ward 5, Councilor Junta said, and people in Ward 6, they've seen enough. They've seen enough in their ward. Put it someplace else. Thank you.
Further discussion? Councilor Eigenman.
Yeah, this is going to be a razor-thin vote. Yeah, I much preferred, for the record, for those who don't know, putting it in my ward, which is at the traffic circle, the quid pro quo being, I did not want to start downtown or the Tannery, absolutely, but also, you know, we work in, Councilor Shand and I work day in, day out with Councilor Junta, so we wanted to respect the wishes of his ward residents. But you heard from Councilor Shand, this is necessary because the alternative is horrible. It's just litigation. And again, going to the ballot is something that's reserved to the voters. They can do that. But, you know, we've had a lot of tough votes since I've been on the council, which take 8 bond measures, real property zoning. And, you know, I really think even when we bitterly disagree, which clearly we do on this one, you know, we have to sometimes put things behind us. So this is extremely uncomfortable for those of us on the committee, but and it's going to be razor thin. I don't know if it's going to pass. I hope it does. We knew we were going to lose the Ward 5 councilor, our colleague, and now we've lost the Ward 6 councilor. So I hope that this compromise picks up the extra votes and we can end this. It's a lot of turmoil, and again, the alternative really is terrible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Further discussion? Hearing none, we'll take a roll call vote on this matter.
The motion to approve ordinance number 24. Councilor Vogel?
Yes.
Councilor Z?
Yes.
Councilor Devlin, for the record, is still absent. Councilor Earls?
Yes.
Councilor Eigenman?
Yes.
Councilor Junta?
No.
Councilor Khan?
Yes.
Councilor O'Brien?
No.
Councilor Shan?
Yes.
Councilor Tontar?
Yes.
Councilor Connell?
Yes.
Meeting 8, measure passes.
Mr. President, that's motion to remove lease of Coast Guard Auxiliary Building on Plum Island, Order 37.
Second.
Moved and seconded, removed from committee. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Motion to remove.
Yeah,
Can somebody retrieve Councilor Devlin?
exactly.
Yeah, good point, thank you. He might bring us the Red Sox score as well.
What number are we doing?
I'm sorry?
37.
87.
Our side or their side?
He's not coming back.
Is anyone gone for?
Charlie, 2-0.
Okay, good.
What's the score?
2-0.
Coast Guard.
2-0 Red Sox?
EPS. Is it really?
I don't know, 2-0
Councilor
Red.
Devlin returned. I'd like to make a motion to approve as amended in committee on October 9th.
Second.
Discussion. Councilor Eigenman.
Yes, on this one, I don't know that everyone has a copy, so I'm going to hand my copy of what came out of committee to the clerk, and I'm going to defer to the planning director, Andrew Port, to explain this one.
Thank you.
I know some of you were willing to develop committee meeting earlier this evening.
I think I've got it, but
Thank you.
I don't know what I did with mine.
Here you
Oh.
go. We can share.
Okay,
at the mic,
Thank you. This order was submitted back in May, and there were several committee meetings and various exchanges I've had with the ward councilor and some others on this. The original order is shown here in markup format, amended to the committee's meeting this evening. There are a couple of deed restrictions unique to this property. They're referenced. That's why you see A through E in there. A couple of things like the fact that the Coast Guard Auxiliary has, through the deed and in a side agreement with the city, the ability to use that facility for training purposes on a monthly basis, periodically. There's also a requirement that the building be maintained in accordance with the Secretary of Interior's standards. That's a typical regulation that's cited on historic buildings to make sure that they're kept in their historic state or renovated to their historic state. So there are a couple of things unique to this property that are already covered by the original order that was submitted. But in discussions with the ward councilor in particular, there were some concerns about parking. So in order to address those concerns, we wanted to make sure that the potential reuse of this building, other than what it's currently used for, which is polling and the occasional training that's done by the Coast Guard Auxiliary, we wanted to make sure that if there is any other future use of that facility, that it does not overwhelm the parking lot. So conditions F and G that have been added in the committee and were recommended by the committee require that the use only occupy no more than 10 spaces in the parking area. They're not designated, to be clear, but this is also a cap on those number of parking spaces to make sure it does not become an issue. And it gives the city the ability through a lease that would come back to the city council for review, as is referenced in the red text. That's the fact that we come back to the planning board, to the city council for approval. That lease agreement would require the tenant to maintain those 10 spaces or less, and if they did not adhere to that, the city could cancel or terminate the lease after a 30-day right to cure. There's also a requirement that we, as a city, undertake a parking analysis at that parking lot in July and August of the year, approximately following the first tenant occupancy of that building. And that's so that we can have another check and balance and make sure that we're looking at the parking lot and making sure that there isn't any adverse impact to the usage of those parking lots during their peak summer usage. So in essence, the modifications that came out of committee, I think, satisfy the ward councilor and the Planning and Development Committee, and I respectfully request your approval this evening. That would allow us to go out for an RFP, get proposals for the reuse of the building on the times that it's not being used as a polling location or training facility for the Coast Guard Auxiliary, and we would come back to you per the edit that you see in the red there. We would come back to you with the lease agreement that we've selected.
Thank you. Councilor Agaman.
Sorry, and I neglected to say this was recommended 3-0, and we felt that this had all the protections we needed since coming back to the council.
Thank you. Discussions?
Yeah, so
Mr.
as
Z?
not to repeat, I'll echo the same. The thing I will add is I spoke to some residents out on Plum Island. I've been floating this out there for a while, and there is general support for reuse of the building in some way because of its current condition, but the questions always come back to parking and traffic. There's only one road out there. The building has no associated parking, and the parking next door is primarily for the beach and is mired in its own controversy on an annual basis. So I just want to thank Director Port for his help with some of the language. I asked for a release valve, if you will, on the parking. If it becomes a disaster, he's delivered on that. And I appreciate the committee's work to add the amendment to have it come back to the council with the lease, similar to what we did at 115 Water, so that we'll have a chance to review that and ensure that everything looks good. So I support it and ask you to do so as well.
Thank you, Councilor. Further discussion? Hearing none, this being a disposition, a matter disposing of some property, even through a lease, we'll ask for a roll call of the vote.
Councilor Vogel?
Yes.
Councilor Zede?
Yes.
Councilor Devlin?
Yes.
Councilor Earls?
Yes.
Councilor Agaman?
Yes.
Councilor Junta?
Yes.
Councilor Khan?
Yes.
Councilor Bryan?
Yep.
Councilor Shan?
Yes.
Councilor Tontar?
Yes.
Councilor Connell?
Yes.
Measure passes.
The matter passes. Good. Councilor Agaman, anything else?
Motion to remove Order 54, Preservation Restriction, 241 High Street.
Moved and seconded. All those who remove this from committee, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No, it's out.
Motion to approve as amended in committee on October 9.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Councilor Agaman.
This one's simpler. So this is Mount Royal, including the high school, and they took CPA money several times, mainly for the woodwork, but we never actually had a deed restriction. So now we're getting one, and the only issue with this, we can't give it to ourselves. That's not going to work. So we had to find a third party that would enforce. Initially, it had gone to the Preservation Trust, but the mayor recommends bringing it to the Historical Society of Old Newbury, which is fine. But the amendment we made in committee was we want to have a condition that we check with the Mass Historical Commission, because our understanding is that they had approved the previous grantee. So just want to, cross our T's and dot our I's. And with that, this is a very hefty 27 pages, and we recommend approval. 3-0.
Further discussion. Councilor Zede.
Yeah, I'm going to vote no on this. I think that the restriction should go to the Newburyport Preservation Trust simply because they were offered it, and from what I understand, they did some 18 months of work on it, including some time and money. So I still am not clear on why that wouldn't work anyways. I don't think any logical argument's been brought to explain why they shouldn't receive it, and certainly they've been active and I think have been good stewards of the other properties on which they have a preservation restriction. So no problem with the restriction itself. I just respectfully disagree that we should ask somebody to do something and then take it away from them at the last second.
Thank you, Councilor. Further discussion. Councilor Genta.
I happen to agree with Councilor Zede. One of the questions that I had when this first came up in the committee is who did the work? And the Preservation Trust, from what I'm told, did the work. So I don't know why there's been a change on that. I did make the recommendation to put the body that did the work on there. Looks like we're moving in a different direction, but I do have an issue with that. That's all.
Further discussion. Hearing none, we'll move to a vote. Does this require a voice, a roll call vote?
It's an acceptance of restriction. I would do a roll call.
Yeah, that was what I was thinking. Okay. So we'll do a roll call on this.
Councilor Vogel?
Yes.
Councilor Zede?
No.
Councilor Devlin?
No.
Councilor Earls?
Yes.
Councilor Agaman?
Yes.
Councilor Junta?
No.
Councilor Khan?
Yes.
Councilor O'Brien?
No.
Councilor Shan?
Yes.
Councilor Tontar?
Yes.
Councilor Connell?
Yes.
Needing a simple majority, I believe measure passes.
Thank you. Anything further, Councilor Agaman?
Yes, two more things. Motion to remove appointment 51, Don Walters, 15 Smith Street, to the planning board.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's out.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion.
Yes, under our new rules, all appointees have to have a public hearing. We noticed it. Nobody appeared to speak. Mr. Walters did appear. He's a 13-year veteran, and we unanimously recommended his reappointment.
Very well. Further discussion. Councilor Zede.
I just want to state for the record that I support this appointment and I like this appointee, but that for future discussion, my vote for an appointee does not mean I assent to all of their positions in the future. So in the previous debate that just came up, there was a lot of discussion that, hey, we're not following the planning board and we appoint all of them. So I just want to make that clear. I'm assessing the person's fitness for the position, and I believe this gentleman has served the planning board well. It doesn't mean I'm going to agree with everything that comes out of there. So I just wanted to get that on record. Thank you.
Further discussion. Hearing none, we'll take a roll call on this matter.
It's appointment of Don Walters, Councilor Vogel, Councilor Zede,
Yes.
Councilor Devlin,
Yes.
Councilor Earls,
Yes.
Councilor Agaman,
Yes.
Councilor Junta,
Yes.
Councilor Khan,
Yes.
Councilor O'Brien,
Yes.
Councilor Shan,
Yes.
Councilor Tontar,
Yes.
Council President Connell.
Yes.
Last one, Mr. President. Motion to remove communication 83, CPA funding recommendation for Colby Farm.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. It's out.
Motion to approve as amended in committee on October 9th.
Second.
And seconded by Councilor Junta. Discussion.
Yes, Mr.
Councilor
President.
Ackman.
So this is a companion, really, to the zoning amendment, Ordinance 25 for Colby Farm Lane Residential Overlay District. To refresh everyone's recollection, those were both sent to planning and development because it's a package deal. Essentially, this is former farm property with open land. The councilors in that who are affected directly, ward councilors Junta and Tantar in 4 and 5, have been working with Andy Port and the developer to do this package deal, where essentially they'll limit their development along what used to be, well, it's Colby Farm Lane now, Crow Lane, and therefore leave open the view shed. So as part of that, the amendment that we made in committee is to go ahead and approve the appropriation so we can get that off our desk, but it's conditioned on the entering of a development agreement between the developer and the city of Newburyport to protect the view shed. So that's it. The CPC apparently made a similar recommendation, but we wanted to make sure it was in our motion, and the clerk has it. The money only goes if they go through with the deal to protect the view shed. 3-zip, we recommended it.
Thank you, Councilor. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nothing further, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor. We'll move on to further committee reports. Let's go back to Budget and Finance.
Motion to remove Order 022, local retail sales tax on marijuana.
Second.
Moved and seconded. The discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye. We have to take it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and motion, move to take it out. We just,
Take it out.
yeah.
That's what we did.
Oh. We just did.
So
So we just voted on it.
We voted to take it out, so. Councilor Tantar.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Councilor Vogel. Discussion.
Wait, point of order. As amended.
As amended.
Did in committee.
Second.
Motion to approve as amended.
Thank you for the correction. Councilor Tantar.
Yes, this, we voted this out 3-0 as amended, although on the amendment, I voted no, and there were 2 yes. Let me read the amendment to you. The amendment would be a separate paragraph at the end of the current paragraph, and it reads, "It is the intent of the City Council that 1/2 of the receipts be appropriated annually to the budget of the school department, and the remaining half to the maintenance and repair of roadways and sidewalks." Yes, and I will give the clerk a copy of that, but he will not be able to read my handwriting, I have to say that, right. So the very, very rough estimate on the amount of money that we would bring in from the retail is approximately $100,000 on the 3% sales tax. The host agreement would be a separate thing aimed at 3%. And that the thinking, and I'll let them speak for themselves, of those who voted for the amendment, is that there would be sufficient funds in the host agreement to help support drug education in the community, and that this 3% is sufficient to help somewhat in roads, sidewalks, and also to assist the school department. The 2 areas where we never seem to have enough money, which is schools and sidewalks. So I voted for the whole thing as amended, and I would ask you to do so as well.
Further discussion. Councilor Zede.
Yeah, so I just wanted to talk about the amendment that I made in committee. So just to expound a little bit, the 3% sales tax is the only money that's free and clear. There is no specific need that money has to be spent on, and that is differentiated from the 3% that comes out of the host agreement, which has to pass the Emerson test, Emerson College test as it's so called, which means that the money that's taken in has to go to costs that are related to the issue. And it's been some precedent, I think, in the state that prevention coordinators and youth education, that sort of thing, it passes that test. I mean, of course, there's no case law on this yet, but common sense also dictates the same. So that's my first reason for supporting that amendment. Second one is, I think that the 50% of the sales tax, meals tax, has been a very successful program for the sidewalks. It has provided a consistent, steady source of funds every year that has made it, I think, a substantial difference. While I realize that people are still upset because it doesn't seem like we're getting too much, that's a discussion for another day, but imagine where we'd be if we didn't have added the approximately $250,000 a year. And third one, to head off any legal challenges, this is just an intent of the City Council. We respect the mayor's ability to appropriate funds and the council to approve them. I did some research on the meals tax and it seemed to have gone the same way. I do hope the administration would honor this request, but I acquiesce that it doesn't hold the weight of law that we're appropriating money here. So I ask for your support on the whole thing, but I think this is a logical use for the money, two of our top priorities, and I think the youth education and other services can be covered through a host agreement, 3% there as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Agaman.
I'm going to support this for three reasons. The first is it's not an enormous amount of money. I mean, I wish it were, but it's not like we're taking millions and earmarking it for schools and sidewalks. That's reason one. Two, schools and sidewalks are the black hole. We could spend millions and still never get there. And then third is, I don't read this as binding on the mayor. It's just an intent. I agree with the sponsor of the amendment, but it does have value to have it in there because it basically says, hey, all things being equal, this is what the council would like to see, which is relevant. So I'm going to vote for it.
Thank you, Councilor. Additional discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. It passes.
Motion to remove Order 061, that is the acceptance of a gift and the grant.
Moved and seconded. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's out.
Motion to approve?
Second. Moved and seconded. Discussion. Councilor Tantar.
Yes, first of all, the grant resulted from money from Homeland Security. That's grant from Emergency Management Planning. It is specific for this use. The use would be to provide protective gear to firefighters who are now responding to situations in which they may be endangered. In the early moments of the gas situation in Lawrence, North Andover, and Andover, there was some thought that it could be a terrorist attack. Our department got there as quickly as possible, could potentially have been in danger. This is gear that will protect them. It's a 50-50 matching grant, and so the STREM chemicals came up with the match, actually more than 50%, and we're very grateful for that. The voting committee was 3-0.
A gift from a terrific company. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? It passes.
Motion
Councilor?
to remove order number 62, which is the acceptance of a gift of $500 from the graduating class of Newburyport High School.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? It's out.
Motion to approve. In committee, we voted 3-0 to accept this.
Do we have a
gift.
second? Thank you. Councilor Tantar.
I heard it.
Go.
We're very thankful to the class of 2018 for the gift.
Very generous of them. Thank you. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
That's it, Mr. President.
And I would instruct the clerk to write a letter of thanks to the class of 2018 and a letter of thanks to STREM Chemicals that, with your indulgence, I'll sign on behalf of the council to those two donor entities. Education.
Nothing to report, sir.
Nothing in general government. License and permits.
Motion to remove Ordinance 23, Amendment to Waterways Fees.
Is there a second? Second. Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Councilor Earls.
This has been hanging out a while, and just to refresh memory, what was found by the Harbor Commission that vessels that were under 16 feet under, by ordinance, did not have to pay a fee. And it was questioned by at least one vessel owner, so they wanted to codify this so that there would be a fee. That fee is mostly used to log the vessel so that they know the vessel is basically their responsibility. We did dig in a little bit of how they set these fees. These fees were set decades ago, and so today, there is no sort of relevance to fee versus cost. But the Harbor Commission feels they're doing well. They have no reason to raise the fees at this point, so it all stays the same, or the intended same, in terms of 16 feet or under. One last point is they want to remove the fee structure from the ordinance so that it would be part of the ordinance, like parking. If the fee were to change, it would be in front of the Harbor Commission for a vote, and then in front of the City Council. This was approved 3-0 in committee.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Z.
I have two questions. One is, did anybody put a number on how much the fees are that are collected from these boats that technically didn't have to pay, but we're paying? Is there a dollar amount? Is it $500, $10 million? I mean, is it? And let me just ask my second question too, if you don't mind, so I get them both out. Why have it done by? Why take it out of the ordinance? Does seem inconsistent with how we do parking, for example. We codify the rate in the ordinance. We do that. We just did that with Riverfest. We updated the ordinance to include a special date. I'm just trying to understand why. It seems easier to keep track of if it's an ordinance, but I want to ask the questions first and then deliberate after I understand it better.
Yeah, I asked that question about what are we talking about for terms of fees, and it was $800 to $1,000. So that's what this fee yields. And there was less than a handful of people that ever remarked on whether it was legal for them to do it or not. It was one person.
Further discussion? Councilor Augerman?
Well, the way I read this is that even though it's not going to be codified, they have to come back to the City Council each time. So that seems to me adequate protection for the public.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Vogel?
Well, thank you. I was going to attempt to answer your question. I think that what they were working at is just in terms of streamlining the effort and be able to talk within the committee and would be able to talk with the voters and so on and so forth without involving us until they get it straightened out, then come back to us. So there was a process piece that they were talking about.
Councilor Z.
Thank you. The reason I asked and the reason my position is that the ordinance would be better is that, in my experience, it's a lot easier to find ordinances. You go to Newburyport Muni Code and you can search them. When we set fees by order, we have to go to the clerk has to go through the record, find the last time the order was passed. We're making strides, I think, and I think the clerk will hopefully smile a little bit on keeping track of things better to make it easier to catalog these things and find them. But if in 10 years you have to go back and find the order, I think it's a lot more difficult than popping in the Muni Code and finding it. That's a practical concern. And then the other one was another question about the Clean Water Act. When this originally came in, it felt like that was a new fee, but it's not a new fee. So this is effectively status quo from what has been happening in practice, not by the ordinance. But so that's not a new thing either. Okay.
Thank you, Councilor. Further discussion? Councilor Vogel.
Yeah, just one more answer to that. Maybe it doesn't work. It's easier to have it out of the ordinance, so in terms of codification, right? So this just gets to sit there, and then the fee changes over here. That was sort of the point. So you can change the fees and post them through the commission, and not have to change.
Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. I believe...
It's an ordinance, Mr. President.
It's an ordinance, correct?
So,
We need a roll call.
motion to approve is amended. Ordinance number 23. Councilor Vogel?
Yes.
Councilor Z?
No.
Councilor Devlin?
Yes.
Councilor Earls?
Yes.
Councilor Argument?
Yes.
Councilor Junta?
Yes.
Councilor Khan?
Yes.
Councilor O'Brien?
Yes.
Councilor Shan?
Yes.
Councilor Tontar?
Yes.
Councilor Connell?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay. Are we done there?
Anything else?
That's it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Councilor. We are to Neighborhood and City Services. Planning development.
Already did it.
I did it.
Let's do it
Don't make
again.
me do it again.
Let's get back to it. Planning, public safety,
Jesus Christ.
public utilities. Councilor Z.
I just want to give the council a brief update on Communication 088, which is the application from a company called First Light to place conduit in the vicinity of Low Street around the Knock Middle School area. All I want to tell you about it is the committee's met twice on it now. The applicant has attended both. Just to give you a brief, what is it? They want to put conduit underneath city streets in order to be able to serve more business customers with high speed in competition with Comcast and Verizon. I see some eyebrows. I wish they were going possibly further, but for this time, it's an expensive endeavor to run fiber. The committee has met twice, and the applicant has been, in my opinion, responsive. And so what I want to make you aware of is that it's going to come out most likely on the 29th. But it came in as a communication, but it's probably going to come out as an order, because through the work of the committee in conjunction with the city solicitor and the city clerk, it seems to make more sense that we do it as an order rather than just approve it. It gives us a vehicle to put in terms and conditions, which again were worked on by the committee in conjunction with the city solicitor. So in order to ease next 2 weeks, just to give you a heads up about what's coming, it's my intention as chair that once we get the order into a more final state, that it would be disseminated to you by email and in advance of the meeting. But I want you to know why it's coming in as a communication and out as an order. And in consultation with the clerk, we think we're okay on that because they're both measures. So maybe that takes 2 minutes off the next meeting. Maybe it adds 3 minutes. I don't know. That's it for me. Thank you.
Rules Committee.
Nothing to report.
Good of you.
Just for the benefit of the clerk, I just want to state, because I'm trying to make myself be better at this, when I motioned to waive the rules for the late file items to be accepted, I specifically meant Rule 16, not all the rules. It's my goal to myself to be better about motioning specific rules. We're not throwing all the rules out. So I'll try and say Rule 16 next time, but I wanted to say that on camera, so we were all clear about that.
I think that was implied. Councilor Tantar.
I would like to rise and note the tragic passing of Sean Perkins. Sean was a student of mine. When I moved to Newburyport, we became friends. He and his wife often walked with a group of us in the morning at 7 a.m. Sean, I was going to say he was one of the kindest people. I think he is the gentlest, kindest, most generous person that I've known, and I'm heartbroken for his family, and I wanted to note that. Thank you.
Thank you.
He was a member of the Parks Commission, by the way.
Further items for the good of the order, I have two. First, I want to thank the councilors for your diligence, for your all the hard work you did on the cannabis ordinances, both cultivation and especially retail. It has not been easy. I think you were sincere, you were thorough, and you accepted your responsibility. I commend you for that. Second, I would invite any councilor to join me in walking on Sunday in the Jeannie Geiger walk. Starts at, I believe, 8:30. Is it 8 o'clock? 8:30 on Sunday morning. And it's a wonderful charitable event for an important cause that I think we can all acknowledge and support. Having said that,
Motion to adjourn.
to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're done.